Right, it's hard to know where to start off when you're trying to understand how Israel becomes so powerful. Maybe it's best to start off with a Johnny Vedmore Read Through with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, and we're going to be looking at an article today that came from another few articles. When I was writing the Schwab series, I came across Guido Goldmann of the German Marshall Fund, best friend to Henry Kissinger. German Marshall Fund was where Alliance for Secure and Democracy was messing around with Twitter from, with Hamilton 68, run by neocons there. Seems like a CIA program. I went back in time, discovered that it was linked to the fact that 1967 Ramparts magazine and New York Times have revealed all of these CIA programs that had been run out of places like Harvard. Harvard had to reform, stop all most of the programs, temporarily, of course. Kissinger went off to be in the Nixon administration, and as Nelson Rockefeller said, at third time of asking, we've got our man in the White House. And so there was a new organization needed to run CIA programs and would be based in Harvard. And that was the German Marshall Fund, which was set up via funding from the German government. And it was really to concentrate on manufacturing, non-governmental development organizations, and watching, like a public policy institute, which was focused on that, on what was going on in the Soviet Union, on creating potential color revolutions, color revolutions. Eventually, it's Guido Goldmann, the German Marshall Fund, is a brilliant way to understand what the deep state does, how they mix with people like Soros and others to cause things like color revolution. And I was studying that, and in studying that, I went back in Guido Goldmann's family history, like I always do, and I went back to his father. And looking at Guido Goldmann's father was mind-blowing. The situation we got today in the world, where Israel are unaccountable, it stems from somewhere, stems from a history. I think we should go back in time, and I should give you a bit of that history in an article that I wrote for my news paste site. Where we are, my friends. Put on my glasses here so I can see properly. You got lots of drop-down menus. You got different series going on at the top. If you want to go and have a little look at any of these series, please do. This is news paste. Please support the work. You can buy me a coffee. You can become a Patreon. You can go via Ko-Fi. You can find other links via this link tree here. But buy me a coffee is seriously the best way to get money into me pocket easily and help fund this enterprise, because this does not pay well. I can promise you, this does not pay well. Being heavily censored is a bad marketing strategy. Here you see the some of the articles, the Epstein articles, me on a recent documentary. You've got episodes of Truth Bomb. You got loads of articles. You've got the Newspace podcast. There's over 100 Newspace podcast episodes out on all audio platforms except for Google, I think. You've got lots of different articles here that you can read. Again, supporting independent journalism is massively important. Do you know about Jeffrey Epstein's family tree? You can find out more there. And here we got last article I brought out. I got 3 articles piled up and the 4th one coming very soon. But this is Trump and Epstein to catch and kill a mockingbird, showing the different ways they managed media, negative press. This is a very interesting article. It's actually the first of a series. There's another one coming that might surprise people. You can also look at Epstein's Little Black Book and his manifest, Flight Manifest, unredacted in multiple versions. There's loads of stuff here, lots of stuff. The site is extremely dynamic, full of articles. I've been busy at work, for quite a while, and you can find me on all of the different things like YouTube and the like. because I'm being so heavily censored on all platforms, there's some platforms I've given less credence to. So Rumble is getting less of my attention now that it started deleting my Youngman articles. There's no point in it really. It just looks like a rug pull platform at this point. But come to Newspaste, support my work. It is important you do. And that is a gentleman we're going to be talking about today. The guy in the middle of that screen there is Nahum Goldmann and the creation of the Zionist World Order by me, Johnny Vedmore. That's my name. Now, you look at this, this AI is made this nice thing, but I thought the Jewish Star of David burning on the Gaza on Gaza's flag seemed appropriate. Nahum Goldmann was one of the most influential Zionists of the 20th century. His life was one of stark political contradictions and allegiances, surreptitious high-level manipulation, and the creation of a form of modern globalism adapted to political Zionism. This is the story of how the Zionist World Order was made manifest. This is a very interesting story about the life of Nahum Goldmann. Nahum Goldmann was born in Belarus in 1895, then part of the Russian Empire. He was an avid Zionist from an early age, becoming the founder of the World Jewish Congress and president of the World Zionist Organization. Goldmann was a prolific Zionist organizer and commanded the front lines of the battle to create the State of Israel, eventually becoming one of the four main power brokers behind its creation. In reviewing his story, we are not only able to better understand the evolution of Zionism as it relates to the Western Hemisphere, but we can also see the tactics which were deployed to achieve the Zionist agenda. Nahum Goldmann played a pivotal role in co-opting the early iteration of globalism by infiltrating the United Nations just as it was forming, and with powerful allies such as Eleanor Roosevelt and Chaim Weizmann, he helped create the paradigm of global conflict we see in the Middle East. Goldmann played many roles during his career. He wore many faces and he influenced many Western politicians. However, except for Jewish historians and academics studying the rise of modern globalism and international relations more generally, Nahum Goldmann's significant impact on the world we now live in has almost been completely forgotten. In a previous article entitled Guido Goldmann, the CFR and the German Marshall Fund, I also explored the extremely close relationship that Nahum Goldmann's son had with Henry Kissinger and the deep state more widely. The relationship between Henry Kissinger and Guido Goldmann saw the fruition of Nahum Goldmann's vision of a world order with Israel as its center point. That's a massively important. Israel as the center of the world. That's what they wanted. The Zionist interlocutor. In the years leading up to World War II, Nahum Goldmann visited various nations surrounding Central Europe in an attempt to lay the groundwork for his dream of a Jewish homeland, while also warning world leaders about the seemingly avoidable genocide of the Jewish people in Europe, which had already been predicted many years before World War II. In November 1936, a wireless to the New York Times confirmed that Dr. Goldmann, president of the Jewish World Congress, was in Yugoslavia to speak to then Regent Prince Paul to seek reassurances that Jews of Yugoslavia weren't to be targeted amidst a rise in anti-Semitic sentiment in the region. In April 1937, Nahum Goldmann was reportedly rallying support against the drafting of Romanian legislation, which he referred to as a flagrant violation of the previously enacted Romanian Minorities Treaty, which had been guaranteed by the League of Nations. The Romanian fascist parties had supported the new law targeting the 5 million strong minority community living in Romania, which included a Jewish population of around 1 million. During this pre-World War II period, Nahum Goldmann was not only the head of Jewish World Congress, he was also a permanent Geneva representative of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, and it is because Nahum Goldmann was based in Switzerland during this period that his son, Guido Goldmann, was born in Zurich. Guido Goldmann became very important in his own right and was even one of Henry Kissinger's closest friends from very early on. This closeness may have been due to Kissinger's mother being Nahum Goldmann's kosher maid. There you can read Newshound 25, The Rise of Henry Kissinger, which is a really, made the day after Kissinger died. Nahum Goldmann had become one of the leading public voices not only for the ideology of Zionism, but also for Palestine becoming the future home of the displaced Jewish people of Europe. In May 1937, Nahum Goldmann traveled to the Middle East to attend the opening of the Pavilion of Israel in Palestine, alongside representatives of the British and French governments. At that event, Goldmann was recorded as the Geneva representative of the Jewish Agency for Palestine. Every room in the newly created Palestine Pavilion had been named after a different benefactor of the Zionist movement. Leading up to World War II, the Zionist intention to make Palestine a home of the Jewish people was clear to all nations with a stake in the region. Nahum Goldmann spent the war years busily pushing the Zionist agenda across the proverbial finish line. During Hitler's ascent to power, it had become clear that many ardent Zionists that once the war and genocide of the European Jews eventually came to a head, there was likely to be no better time in history for Jewish leaders to argue for the creation of the State of Israel. Even though Britain intended to keep control over Palestine, the mandate they had was soon to come under intense pressure, and the extent and scale of the Jewish Holocaust in Nazi Germany was to make the British rule of Palestine untenable. The tensions between the Jews in Palestine and British authorities were already on the rise, but during the war years, Dr. Goldmann was to call for Jews to fight alongside Great Britain against their common enemy. In March 1941, the New York Times reported Nahum Goldmann's call to arms, quoting the Zionist leader saying, "Jews must regard themselves as allies of Great Britain and other democracies in this war and contribute to their maximum as a fighting force." In that speech, given to mainly Jewish congregation of Temple B'nai Jeshurun, located west of Broadway, Goldmann made the future intention of the World Jewish Congress clear, stating, "Only in this way will they, Jews, safeguard their position in the coming peace and their claim to a position of having a voice in deciding the future as people in the world." The position which the World Jewish Congress had already taken was to gain a significant stake in Palestine at the expense of the Arab people who populated the region. It is during these early years of World War II that the Arabs who inhabited Palestine started to realize that they were at great risk of becoming the secondary voice in the region. During this vital period in modern Jewish history, Goldmann toured the various temples and Jewish organizations to mobilize support for the creation of Israel we know today. In fact, during October 1941, a mass transfer of Jews from Europe to the Holy Land was being predicted. Nahum Goldmann and his associates weren't only looking to create Jewish homeland for displaced Jews of Europe, along with other Zionist leaders, he was also helping them gain military training in arms. The New York Times reported that Nahum Goldmann and other Zionist leaders were arguing for the formation of an armed Jewish corps in the Near East to serve on a basis of equality with Britain's other allies and a denunciation of England's crystallization policy, which curtailed Jewish immigration to the homeland. By June the following year, representatives of 9 nations which had come under Nazi occupation had formed the Advisory Council on European Jewish Affairs, an organization which was affiliated to the World Jewish Congress office in New York. They pledged that the eventual freeing of their homelands from Nazi control would carry with it a return of freedom of their Jewish minorities. The heads of the 9 nations involved in the latter meeting included the exiled politician of Latvia, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia, amongst others. The delegation also included Professor Jacques Hadamard, a representative who was there on behalf of the delegation of Free France. Goldmann and other Zionists began to groom the potential future leaders of Europe who were living in exile during World War II. Nahum Goldmann's World Jewish Organization and World Jewish Congress were not the only Zionist groups working towards a new Jewish future. Goldmann's organization were also promoting such Zionist leaders as Yehudif Simconif, who in 1942 was a Palestinian delegate to the Pioneer Women's Organization. You can also read Guido Goldmann's CFR and German Marshall Fund, as Kissinger's international seminar was revealed to be CIA-funded program. The elites of the CFR hatched a plan to create a new organization to train young global leaders. That's also on Newspace. Find it on Unlimited Hangout as well. The Zionist leaders had spent the 1930s and 40s setting up influential organizations designed to spread their ideology. Nahum Goldmann, although painted as a poor father figure who didn't give enough attention to his young children, had a massive impact on his son's life, with Guido Goldmann eventually following in his father's footsteps in this regard. Guido went on to found the German Marshall Fund of the United States at Harvard and was responsible for cloning tens of thousands of other influential non-governmental organizations with significant ties to the Central Intelligence Agency. The Palestinian problem. In October 1942, Nahum Goldmann was representing the executive committee of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, warning that the crucial moment for the realization of Zionism will be the immediate post-war period, perhaps even before a formal peace conference. He was quoted as stating that it needed to be made clear to the United Nations and above all to public opinion and the administration of the United States that these homeless, uprooted Jews cannot, after the war, be sent back to their countries of origin where they will have no possibility of existence. The latter statement was also made while he was the organization's representative to the League of Nations. In this capacity, he was also forcefully signed he was also to forcefully signal the future Zionist policy towards the Arabs who inhabited Palestine during this period. There is no possibility of obtaining Arab consent to the establishment of a Jewish majority, stated Goldmann during the aforementioned meeting of Zionist leaders, making it clear to the gathering that the intent of Zionist leaders during the post-war years was to create a Jewish homeland through the mass settlement of displaced refugees. Goldmann referred to any discussions with Arab leaders of the regions about the matters as completely unrealistic and asserted that never in history has a people given up its position as a majority to another people, and in fairness to the Arabs, nobody should expect them to do so. Goldmann and his Zionist colleagues were starting to set the groundwork for the obvious Arab resistance to come. Robert Schold, who was the vice president of Zionist Organization of America, was even more unequivocal in his tone on these matters, stating, Palestine as a whole must be recognized by the nations of the world as a Jewish homeland where Jews shall have unrestricted right of immigration and colonization, and where they shall be free to become the majority. The crux of the solution, I prompt, large-scale immigration goes into millions if need be, as of right. At the same event where both Goldmann and Scholz laid out their plans for Zionist takeover of Palestine, Judge Morris Rothenberg, the former president of the Zionist Organization of America, stated clearly that Zionism must now either offer a comprehensive solution commensurate with post-war Jewish need, or the Zionist movement will pass into history as an interesting but abortive attempt to solve the Jewish problem, and insofar as we can see, there will be nothing to take its place. This was a crucial period, one that was posed as a do-or-die moment for Zionist movement as a whole. But the British were not so keen to capitulate to the Zionist demands and to give up their dominant position in Palestine, and their rule over the Palestinian people. They had been carefully paying attention to Zionist calls for a Jewish state in the land that the British colonial power had full dominion over. One sentence, apparently. I'm crazy. And here, Palestine is a conspiracy for you. You can read on News Theory. In 1939, a MacDonald White Paper was drawn up in an attempt to close any further immigration to Palestine to prevent such a Zionist coup taking place. But even though the British and Jews based in the region throughout the early years of World War II had become tentative allies, they were soon to be heading towards disagreement on the future of Palestine. It was to be the Americans who eventually forced Britain's capitulation of Palestine. By September 1943, Dr. Israel Goldstein of New York, who was president of Jewish National Funds of America, was appointed as the president of the Zionist Organization of America during a meeting on September 12, 1943, in Columbus, Ohio. He was presented with a $500,000 to aid a Palestine land drive by Mendel N. Fisher on behalf of the Jewish National Fund, which was to be used for land redemption in Palestine. Fisher announced that the money received for such a project at the time totaled $3,960,000, a sum valued at around $68 million in 2024, and had been raised over just a previous 11 months alone. The Zionist movement was well organized, and when World War II came to an end, this preparation proved to be invaluable. As the true horrors of Holocaust in Europe became known, many of the Zionist leaders began preparing for the next stage of their plan. In 1917, during the Great War, the British government signed the Balfour Declaration, a public statement announcing Britain's support of a national home for the Jewish people in what was then Ottoman-controlled Palestine. Also during World War I, Nahum Goldmann began working for a German intelligence and propaganda bureau linked to the German Foreign Office, the Nachrichtenstelle für den Orient, as it was referred to in German, focused on exploiting ethnic and religious nationalist groups within the Ottoman Empire as a means of pushing back against the increasing British and French influence. Working for German intelligence taught Nahum Goldmann a lot, but his loyalty to Germany became undone with the rise of Nazism. As it became clear that Germany was going to lose World War I, many Zionists in Germany began to push their agenda ahead of the priorities of the downtrodden German people. This led to a serious increase in animosity between Jews and Germans, something which was to bubble and fester throughout the decades to come. When the Zionists in 1945 were discussing the post-war mandate of British Palestine, the Balfour Declaration became central to this heated debate. The Zionists and Britain were heading towards an impasse over the issue of the Holy Land. In April 1945, the Executive Committee of the Jewish Agency for Palestine sent Stephen S. Wise alongside Nahum Goldmann to San Francisco to oppose any action that would be inconsistent with or prejudicial to the special rights of the Jewish people under the Balfour Declaration and the Palestine Mandate. By this time, the Arabs were becoming enraged by the concerted efforts to displace their people in Palestine, something which had already been expected and planned for. By December 1945, the Palestine Arab Council had rejected any cooperation with Anglo-American inquiry into Palestine and demanded the withdrawal of the policy which Britain's Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin had enacted. At this time, the Arab League consisted of 6 Middle East states and had adopted a more moderate view on the future of Palestine and Arabs living in the region. The Palestine Arab Council began to resist the capitulation of Palestine, stating that Bevin's policy violates official British policy and overlooks Arab national rights and interests. However, the Arab League rejected this stance and had, only a week before, publicly welcomed the American entry into Palestine. The Zionist contingent had set up special offices at the relatively newly formed United Nations to lobby for Zionist interests, and Nahum Goldmann became the director of the specially created UN office. The head of the Zionist movement began a potent charm offensive towards the Americans, who were now perceived as the best chance of seeing Jewish contingent take large parts of Palestine for themselves. In January 1946, the New York Times reported, Dr. Nahum Goldmann of the New York um, Dr. Nahum Goldmann of New York, chairman of the executive committee of the World Jewish Congress, praised the United States Army today for its handling of Polish Jews infiltrating the American occupied zone. The United States had shown a remarkably sympathetic understanding of the reasons that are motivating these Jews to leave countries where life is intolerable for them and to try and reach the America zone, which has won a reputation as a haven for those suffering people, Goldman said. Goldman spelt Goldman with one N in many Western newspapers during this period, had recognized that the Americans' political detachment from Palestinian region had made it more likely that they would side with the Zionist cause. The Zionist assumption was to be proven true as they began to direct the British and Americans into a clash over their individual policies in the region. By July that year, President Truman was accusing the British of taking military action within Palestine without the knowledge or consent of their American allies. Within the same reports, the Jewish Agency for Palestine were accusing the British authorities in the region of widespread terror directed against the Jewish people, including what they referred to as the complete destruction of Meshech Yagur, the largest Jewish settlement at the time in Palestine. The Zionist propaganda battle was complex and rife with emotion. The British were accused of the herding of whole Jewish male populations into British concentration camps. This heated and emotive rhetoric, with the Jewish Holocaust of Europe still very fresh in the minds of all these nations, left the British with a losing hand. It is during this period that four Zionist leaders in particular began to openly lobby the Americans on behalf of the Jewish Agency for Palestine. Rabbi Stephen S. Wise, Dr. Nahum Goldmann, Louis Lipsky, and Rabbi Abba Hillel Silva were soon to ask Truman to intervene to prevent the destruction of generations of labor and achievement of Jewish pioneers and builders. Truman acted swiftly, putting a joint resolution before the Senate and the House of Representatives to withhold American recognition of Transjordan as a unilateral British violation of the Convention on Palestine, as well as Article LXXX of United Nations Charter. The British were on the back foot, and their actions were beginning to be portrayed by the Zionists as akin to those of Hitler. Britain attempted to control the spread of this propaganda in the region itself by barring the creation of Palestinian visas for Dr. Stephen Wise and Louis Lipsky, but in reality, the British were all but defeated. The Zionist leaders would soon use the United Nations to drive the dagger home. They began to argue for what they called a fair partition of Palestine. However, the Zionists' definition of fair partition was to see a newly created kingdom, a Transjordan, get an area of land with a 600,000 strong Arab population, while the rest of the region was to become a free state under Zionist leadership. The latter area of Palestine consisted of 700,000 Arabs and around 600,000 Jews, with plans to increase the Jewish population to around 1,500,000 soon after. But even the Americans at this stage found the partition of Palestine too much to swallow as a solution to what parties involved often referred to as the Jewish problem. Official resistance to the creation of the State of Israel under the control of the most prominent Zionist leaders was soon to dissipate. On the 14th of May, 1948, the declaration which officially created modern Israel was made, and Chaim Weizmann, the former president of the World Zionist Organization, became the de facto head of the until his election as president of Israel on the 17th of February, 1949. The formation of Zionist-aligned globalism. The Goldman residence in New York was a veritable thoroughfare for the American elite, with various famous intellectuals and American politicians, philosophers, socialites, and others coming to bend a knee in honor of Nahum Goldmann. In the post-war world, they recognized Nahum Goldmann as one of the founding fathers of modern Israel. Visitors to the residence included pianist Arthur Rubinstein, philosopher Isaiah Berlin, Seagram's Samuel Bronfman, and Israel's first president, Chaim Weizmann. Politicians intricately involved with the creation of the United Nations also frequented the Goldman household. The UN Secretary General, Dag Hammarskjöld, and influential figure at the early UN, Eleanor Roosevelt, were regular visitors. Herbert Lehman, a Democratic politician and co-owner of Lehman Brothers, was another influential friend. Nahum Goldmann's relationship with Eleanor Roosevelt was vital to achieving this desired aim. She had helped Goldman obtain an office at the United Nations, especially to lobby members for the creation of the Israeli state. The Palestinians did not get such an opportunity. The Goldmans' bustling house eventually saw a visit from the first Chancellor of West Germany, Konrad Adenauer, too. Goldman had traveled to London to meet with West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer in his capacity as president of the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. There he received a statement from Adenauer which read, "The honor of the German people requires it to do all it can to compensate the Jewish people for the injustice done to it." Nahum Goldmann had not only helped to create Israel, but he was also a key part in the reparations process between Germany and the Jewish people and the state of Israel itself. In the book, The Seventh Million, The Israelis and the Holocaust, author Tom Segev writes of some of the negotiations in which Nahum was involved during this period, stating, "When the Israeli and Jewish representatives walked out of formal negotiations, Nahum Goldmann's great hour as a lobbyist and manipulator began. Goldman organized and coordinated a worldwide network of activities aimed at persuading the Germans that this was in their best interest to reach an agreement. As part of this effort, he monitored and even took part in the ceaseless haggling in Bonn. He went to see cabinet ministers, senior officials, and members of parliament. Making his way through the corridors of power and into the inner chambers, he saw everything and heard everything. He plotted intrigues. He shared secrets with supporters, thwarted opponents, collected promises, made threats. A man of 1,000 faces." However, it wasn't only Eleanor Roosevelt, Chaim Weizmann, Dag Hammarskjöld, and Konrad Adenauer who made up Goldmann's contact list. In Nahum Goldmann's 1978 book, The Jewish Paradox, he speaks of many Jewish statesmen he had become close to during his life. "I've had the privilege of knowing several Jewish statesmen personally, men like Leon Blum, Henry Kissinger, Pierre Mendès France, Bruno Kreisky, and others, and good patriots, as they have been and are in respective countries." You can also watch Newshound number 5 on my channel, on Newshound channel, as Kissinger's Awkward Birthday Bash, AT Toast Kissinger for 50th birthday. That's the birthday bash organized by Guido Goldmann himself. One of the aforementioned statesmen, in particular, Henry A. Kissinger, was not only a great influence on Nahum's son, Guido Goldmann, but they quickly became lifelong friends and even shared a bachelor pad together. Why Palestine? Nahum Goldmann was painted with many brushes throughout his life. However, those who understand his impact on the world are often in reverence and awe of his many achievements. The instability we see today in the Middle East was beneficial to the Western deep state establishment that grew out of World War II. The turmoil was designed by a small group of intelligence-linked actors who wanted to create a paradigm of perpetual limited warfare, which would benefit one of the group of people in particular. One group of people in particular, you know those. You may think I'm referring to Jewish people as the potential benefactors, but instead I'm referring to those who look to create order out of chaos. American hegemony has been built by those who systematically create chaos and then fill the vacuum with their kind of order. The Jewish state was formed out of the fires of global conflict, and it's likely that it will collapse under similar pressure. Nahum Goldmann was described as a statesman without a state. He declined top positions in the Israeli government and never officially represented the state of Israel. However, surreptitiously, he was Israel's number one negotiator. He was crucial in entangling the goals of Zionism and those of globalism. And without him, the state of Israel today may not exist. Following World War II, the displaced Jewish people of Europe could have settled in a number of countries. Regardless, the decision to place them in Palestine has caused continuous conflict, trauma, and tragedy ever since. Palestine was chosen as the home of Israel for various reasons. Of course, there were significant historical links to the region for many Jewish people, but the main logical reason for Zionists targeting Palestine was the rise of modern globalism. Leaders such as Nahum Goldmann knew that Palestine was on the crossroads of the world, and they knew that the world was becoming smaller and more interlinked. The academics were predicting a globalist world of tomorrow, and the Zionists wanted to make Israel the center of that new world order, which was emerging from the most brutal war in human history. I will leave you with a quote by Nahum Goldmann from Montreal-based newspaper entitled Le Unité Nationale from the 4th of November, 1953. The Jews might have had Uganda, Madagascar, and other places for the establishment of the Jewish fatherland, but they want absolutely nothing except Palestine. Not because the Dead Sea waters by evaporation can produce $5 trillion worth of minerals and powdered metals. Not because the subsoil of Palestine contains 20 times more petroleum than all the combined reserves of the two Americas, but because Palestine is the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Because Palestine constitutes a veritable center of world political power, the strategic military center for world control. Nahum Goldmann's own words. You can support this work by buying me a coffee. I really do need your help. Life is hard for everybody. I know that, but I mean, this is what I dedicate my life to, and it means I'm constantly at the end of my tether. Constantly, I need your help. Even if you don't realize, like, one or two coffees can mean that at the end of the month I'm not starving. So I appreciate the help from people who have supported me that way too. You can read about Musk and Epstein and the Third Culture dossier. You can go back and learn about the secret experiments conducted on British people for over a century, reporting down his ideological cloud. That's worth it, of course. This was a read through of this article, Nahum Goldmann and the Creation of the Zionist World Order. And it's a massively, again, I say it every time, say it. Really important article. Really important article. The thing about Nahum Goldmann is that not many people know about him. And once you learn about him and then learn about his son and learn about their relationships with the deep state, you start to go, oh, now the world makes more sense. And that's one of the things. And what with that last quote, it's got to be, it's the perfect place for world control. If you want to be at the center of the world, Israel's the place to be. They've made it that way. They've made it look like that way for the Western world. And they want the Eastern world to get involved too. But to be perfectly honest, what goes up must come down. Entropy is built into anything. Eventually, it'll all fade away. And that was a lot of work. To be perfectly honest, when I started writing that was it was October 2022. I was with Whitney Webb at the time. She was doing the book tour. She had taken our son across to do a book tour in America. I was in the north of Chile, staying in a place called Arica, and I was talking with Khan Disley, who helped me research for the German Marshall Fund, and we were talking about Nahum Goldmann, and that article started there, and I knew it was necessary to tell the story. I knew it wouldn't necessarily be the type of article where people are like, oh, I'm really happy you wrote that article. It's exposed loads for me. I think people need to know it's much more of a history article. It's much more of a piece of analyzing how we got there. And there's some really good questions in there as well. It's like, why Palestine is a really important one that not many people understand. And many people don't understand what actually happened during that time. How another thing that people don't understand, which came out in the third of the Schwab articles, which was just before the Guido Goldmann articles, was the Kissinger continuum, the unauthorized history of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader program. Load of people have a different idea of what how supported Israel were. Most Americans, the American public, the British public, did not support a creation of a state of Israel. They knew what it led to. It was created so that chaos could be made, and out of that chaos can bring some sort of order for these people. That is really it's the same with immigration. If they force people out of that region, which they have over and over again, they have wars, Iraq war, etc., Syrian war, keep causing people to flee. It means it causes instability and chaos in our countries when these immigrants arrive, and then they use that as well. So the same people are creating the problem and then are benefiting from the PR for the problem. So it's a perfect cycle for them. They get people out of the country, they force people out with war and famine, and then they exploit the fact that they go into someone else's country and they're hated. And that is using the reason why so many people detested the Jewish population in Germany at the time was partially because of that and because of what happened with World War One. That's really important to understand. A lot of the German people felt they were betrayed by the Jews in around 1916, 17, 18. Nahum Goldmann was working for the German intelligence at that time, and a lot of the Jews who worked for German intelligence purposely undermined Germany, and that remained a bone of contention up until World War II, and we all know what happened, what might have happened, what is accused of happened. Who knows now? We're in the era of fifth generation warfare. Everything we used to think we knew now is all up in the air. But that's a really important article. I hope you enjoyed it. I do need your help. Buy me a coffee if you can. Become a Patreon. Do anything like that. Well worth it. There's over 100 audio podcasts up on Spotify, Amazon, blah, 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 blah. All of those things. I'm doing stuff every day. I'm really interactive. Come to X, interact with me. Come anywhere else. Truth Bomb will be coming back soon. If you haven't seen what Truth Bomb is, go across now and learn what Truth Bomb is. I'll be there waiting for you. It's been great to have you with me. I really appreciate you being here for this Johnny Vedmore read through. And I just got one last thing to say. Bye!